Trying to give them
On to the next one.
that's enough sets. You guys mind if I share this?
You just have to get closer to him.
You can see what's going on. What's her name? Oh, really? Oh. That's cool.
Okay, I think we're ready. All right, cool. So if you missed it when I said it a little bit ago, and already, if you haven't registered your vehicle on their online system, there's a few flyers hanging around with QR codes. Please do that with your license plate, otherwise they will give you a ticket. So that's the first thing. Next thing, we have a tour this weekend. So I know a lot of folks in here are participating in it, but you know, if you are not, you definitely should come around this weekend. We've got 28 stops, over 100 artists, lots of stuff to see. We also partnered with Almost Real Things, and they are going to take their art bus around to a couple different routes, about 7 studios, which is about 48 artists, I think. So there's one of these over there too. I've got one up here. It's a good way to avoid traffic. It's $35, but there's a coupon code on here. Art bus friend. Yeah. They'll give you $5 off. You can do both tours right in a row and stay on the bus all day, so that's kind of cool. Let's see here.
And that's online too, right? We can go to it.
Yeah, it's on our website, social media, all that stuff. So yeah, you can get to it. And then let's see here. Oh, if you do go around this weekend and take some amazing photographs, I will be sending out an email with maybe a link to a Google Drive or something that I would definitely appreciate people sharing some photos from this weekend, because I'm not going to be able to make it around and take photos. So it will be helpful. So Bob, did you have something you want to say?
GACA has been sort of an informal organization. We have a little steering committee, and maybe there's some openings for other people that want to be on the steering committee. So if you'll contact me or Sarah, we'll consider your application.
So yeah, it's basically just helping us figure out what y'all want to do. So how we want to spend our time. So anybody else have any other announcements? You want to share
I'm looking for an air pan. I'm like,
okay. So our guest tonight is Sarah Anderson. Sorry, Sarah Anderson and Pip is Instagram famous.
Yeah.
She's on Sarah. So I met Sarah virtually 3 years ago now. We both did the Finding Your Voice mentorship with Naomi Clement. So when I saw she was coming to town, I asked her to come demo for y'all. So I will let you go from here.
Sweet. Well, thanks everybody for being here. I guess you're here every month, but it's still pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited to be here in Austin. I just got done teaching at Eye of the Dog Center. Is anybody familiar with that place? Maybe? It's the coolest place I think I've ever been, besides here, of course. But yeah, so I got done teaching there, and I just feel so spoiled to be in this area. Texas is awesome, a little hot, so this fan's wonderful. I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, Columbus, Indiana, like straight up and down the line of Indiana. I went to Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana for undergrad. Ted Neal, if anybody's familiar with him, big wood building kiln guy. he was my professor, and so I started in sculpture. And whenever my computer turns on from being dead, I will show you the whole beginnings of how that went through undergrad to where I'm at now. But while that's charging and getting going, I'm just going to show you a little bit about my process. So I put a few pieces on the tables. You're welcome to pass those around, check any of those out. But I do a little thing called sgraffito. Sgraffito is the Italian word for scratching. I'm sure us being potters, everyone's maybe a little familiar with that process. But I like to take it to the extreme, and I like to go a little crazy. Let's see if you can. Oh yes, I think this is just the coolest thing. I gotta do that because whenever I'm carving too, I have to walk around, and everyone has to see it behind my shoulder. So this is great. So this is my sgraffito technique. So I've got my weird little rat guy, one of my cartoon friends. So I like to take it to the absolute extreme with carving. I like to call it my double outline technique. If you can picture like a butterfly with little tiny antennas, if I were to carve a halo around that, it saves all of those little details, like the fine lines of individual lines. I don't have a whole lot of that going on here. I have really thick outlines, but that double outline of that halo around everything saves all of those details when I carve away that negative space. So I'll go into that a little bit more tonight too. So that's a little bit of an example of that stuff. I always carry around, who's got a damp box? Familiar with damp boxes? Anybody? Cool. I couldn't live without this thing. I have like 10 in my studio. I keep them all under my tables. It's like production, I make 50 pots at one time, carve all of them, paint all of them. So if I did that without these damp boxes, I would either have a broken wrist or not a lot of pots. So I've got a few things started from a couple of other workshops I've been doing, and I'll bring some of these out. And also, if you have a damn box, you can probably sympathize with the lovely green on the inside. Lots of fun things we do as potters. So, this is one of my pieces I've just begun to start carving. And so it's one of my little sheriff frog guys. And I've got some of this as the main outline. On this side, you can see just like one outline of everything. And then when I start to get to this side, it's a double outline. So I'm doing a halo effect around all of my positive space things. And then eventually I'm going to carve out the background of all those negative spaces. So I'll go into that in just a little bit. Put them back in here. So, has anybody tried sgraffito? Oh, yeah, sweet, awesome, okay. It is porcelain, yeah. And if anybody has questions, please shout it out. I'm not shy. Cone 5 porcelain. It is called Coda porcelain from Kentucky Mud Works. I don't know if y'all get that one down here. I don't know. Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's one of my favorites. But it's like the whitest clay that I've been able to find, and I love it. But I also, whenever I'm hand building on top of wheel throwing, I like to use, what's it called? I think 365 standard porcelain. It's just like a little bit more on the gray side, but it's really good for hand building as well as wheel throwing. So I kind of like using both of those on different things. So the first question I usually get on this technique is how many layers of underglaze to put on. Does anybody else use underglaze very much? Anybody use Amico underglaze? Yes. We're all broke, yeah. Same. Don't tell people. But I am spoiled, and I live like 10 minutes from Amico in downtown Indianapolis, so I've got a lot of good friends in the marketing department, so I can partner up on this tour. I'm on a year-long tour, and so that means I get a lot of underglaze supplied to me for all of these classes I'm teaching. So this is one that I've mixed myself. I've labeled it light or dark orange peach, and 3. I don't know what that means. I keep things very organized. I always call myself the laziest potter, but I love colors. That's one really big factor. If you can't tell, my favorite color is orange, or any shade of orange. And so I think that's been really fun to kind of mix and match colors of different shades. And it's like cooking. I'm really bad at cooking too. I don't follow recipes. I just kind of go for it. And that's so much more fun to me. So I obviously have one layer of this color on top to begin with. So I always do like 1.5 layers. And by 1.5, I mean I have a generous glob on my brush like this that's about to fall off, and I smother it on there. And if I see any other spots on the cup that you can see the clay through, then I just go back and do maybe 1 or 2 more of those all over the piece, but I like to do just one really big thick coat because again, I'm lazy and I don't want to do it 2 times. I just want to get a big coat on there and let it dry. And it tends to work out just fine. I don't like to apply it like this. Same whenever you're throwing, you're not going to get the whole thing covered if you're doing that. It's not even. So I like to stay here for one go, move my way down, and so forth. I also tend to get a little bit of streaking happening and not in the good way. And if it burns out in the kiln at all, it's usually because I put it on too thin. It also kind of depends on, how hot the kiln gets. I've noticed if I take it to cone 10 in any way, it tends to streak out and burn out a lot faster. The colors change pretty drastically at cone 10. I remember in undergrad I was trying to do like a whole series of these planters for a planter show, and I painted all the beautiful underglaze colors so bright and pretty, and I put them in cone 10, and they came back out all brown. So I was so sad with that, but I've got it all, you'll see it on my presentation, how sad it was. But, so that's how I paint on one of those underglazes. I use just a regular fan brush. It's $2 from Hobby Lobby. It's not that crazy. I used to use those bamboo brushes. I still really like the coverage that those get, but they tend to take a lot of the underglaze and I waste a lot of it in the brush. So I tend to save a little bit more underglaze that way. 2 of my favorite colors right now are the bright orange and the chartreuse. I've used that, if you couldn't tell, in a lot of the stuff around here. So those are 3 of my favorites right now too. What else am I going to pass around? I'm going to pass around this little folder of some of my newer designs. So we're going to talk a little bit about these characters. So if anybody wants to check those out, feel free. And then on this side, as long as you guys don't make fun of me, you can check out some of my older designs. Just be careful. So you'll start to see the progression. So the older stuff's going to go this way, newer stuff will go this way, and we'll cross. But you'll see the difference. So some of I'll talk about a little bit about that while I start to carve.
Okay.
Oh yes, and then some of those guys too. Yes. But some of these cartoon guys originated, I think, from. Can you see this? Okay, fine. I'll do this. There we go. So some of these cartoons originated from really probably my childhood. I love Disney. I love the old cartoons. Those are very much an inspiration of the stylized types of things that I do. Whenever I was growing up, I have an older brother, and he's now an animator, motion graphics worker, person owns his own company. My parents are both graphic artists, illustrators, so I think it kind of came just like naturally to me. And so I don't think I had much of a choice. I grew up playing sports. I didn't want to touch clay or any art-related things at all. And then once I went off to college, I was like, well, clay seems kind of fun. My portfolio was atrocious. I don't know how I got into undergrad, but thankfully I did. And now here we are. So whenever I first started working on things, I'll kind of touch on it whenever I talk about when I pull up that presentation, but I started off in sculpture, and I did a lot of metal casting, a lot of iron pours, a lot of glass blowing. Pretty much everything that I don't do now is what I did in undergrad. And I really liked it because I got to explore all of these different mediums, and I got to really try out a lot of the things that I didn't think I was going to get to try out in the real world. And so I knew that, there were pottery studios everywhere, so I was like, I could do that just fine. So I knew that, glass blowing was going to be a little bit harder. So I started off with that as a sculpture major, and did a lot of big figurative work, like my thesis was a giant 2 ladies hanging on a wall. I welded the framework to hang that on the wall, and one was being eaten by an octopus. Again, I've got pictures coming. But it was just very funny how totally different it is from what I'm working on now, because I feel like growing up, well, not so much growing up, but just like learning in an academic setting, I think I was really taught to be more focused on the pain of things. Like, use your pain, use that for something. Like, get a really juicy artist statement. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but I really felt like I had to, to an extent, perform a little bit with my work, and I didn't love that feeling, which is why I'm still kind of hesitant to go back to grad school. But I think that that taught me a lot. I think that's an amazing way to express yourself and express your work, but it just didn't resonate with me as much. And so I tried to make that body of work and that my thesis of, you know, these large installation sculpture things that were as big as me and just massive. And that was more for the technical side of things. I really wanted to know how to do it. I took a lot of photo classes, a lot of printmaking classes. Like, I just liked to know how to do things. And so I think that's what drew me. I did one project in undergrad for sgraffito, and whoever's passing around that one, if you saw a giant chicken in there, that's from my very first sgraffito project. I raised chickens for about 15 years, so they have a special place in my heart. But I think that that was something that was really interesting as I was continuing to move on of like, okay, what's important to me? What do I want my work to say? And I knew I was drawn to things that were more difficult and that I couldn't fully understand right when I looked at it. And so that was something that I was trying to pursue a little bit more aggressively. So right after undergrad, after my thesis, I was just applying to all of the shows, applying to everything, trying to, you know, just get my foot in the door anywhere. And I had a small teaching residency in Ohio for a time after school, and then I was pretty quickly hired as a studio tech at the Indianapolis Art Center in Bradford, Indiana. And so I was there for about 3 years, and a month in, my boss, the studio chair, was like, see ya, you got this. I am fresh out of undergrad, I don't know what I'm doing, but okay. And so I got thrown into this position of running the entire department as a fresh out of undergrad person. It was insanity, but I think that's why yeah, I think that's why I kind of, you know, I love to work hard. I love things that are a little, you know, again, that are challenging, that I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing yet. And I think that's where I thrive, and that's definitely where I thrived then. So I learned so much about, you know, firing 10 kilns in a week, and one of them being a massive gas kiln, and just like all of the pressures of that. But then I realized quickly that I didn't want to do that forever, and I did want to sell work. So back and forth to where I ended up with my body of work. During that time, I was working in the evenings on my own work and trying to figure out what I wanted to say with my work, but also making money at the same time. And Midwest is kind of hard with like figurative work. And so I was like, okay, I need to kind of do some more functional stuff. Also, is everybody able to see this okay? Okay. So I think that was something I started to think a little bit more about. So a little bit more of a backstory about me. I've had Lyme disease for about 15 years, chronic inflammation, all kind of good stuff. And so I was like, okay, that's where I can use the pain. I could put that into my artist's tape. That's the juicy stuff. And so then I started to make a body of work about, I think I was probably talking about it in that class online during COVID. I completely forgot about that. But I was like, yeah, this is good. And I couldn't have cared less about it, but I was like, yeah, people will resonate with this. And so I started to do that. I made a series of jars and other teapots and things that had medicinal herbs and supplements that I would use to combat the chronic inflammation. And so that was something that I was like, oh yeah, this will look good as a body of work. And I had my solo show with that stuff. And as soon as the solo show came out, I remember looking and I just thought, this is the worst thing that I've ever done. I hate this. And it was fine. I mean, it looked fine. It was okay. But again, it just like did not resonate with me at all. And so then I was thinking more about like, you know, what I actually wanted to talk about. And I was in the Indianapolis Clay Conference listening to a lecture. I forget who was even talking. I feel really bad because I zoned out completely and I started doodling. And again, in that whatever folder that is, I started sketching some rats. And my rats came to life. And I'll have to find them, but they're pretty rough. They don't look like the ones that I passed around right now. They looked a little crazy, a little rabid maybe. And I was like, whatever this is what I'm excited about. And I'm still not sure to this day why I preferred that over some flowers. I just think I might be a little crazy, and that's okay too. But again, I kept continuing to, you know, look into the work and why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And I finally come to a realization that these cartoon creatures and different, you know, funny scenes and narratives that I'm making on pots, it comes about with just a sense of humor. I think at the end of the day, if something is bright and colorful and funny and it makes me smile, makes other people smile, we can have that conversation about how you can heal through laughter. Laughter is the best medicine. Like, at the end of the day, that's what actually I was excited to talk about. And it was really cool to kind of pair both of those stories together. And, you know, it's not really about my Lyme disease. It's not really about, like, the pain of the journey. It's about, you know, what I choose to focus on now instead of focusing on all of that other stuff. So, you know, if I'm at a craft fair, it's just because I like cartoon animals. But if I'm in a setting where I'm talking about it, you know, a little bit more professionally, that's really where it comes from. I couldn't care less about frogs. They're not my favorite. A lot of people think that frogs are just the best thing. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad that you love that and you can buy my work. But I did have a frog growing up. His name was Bubbles, and he lived for much longer than my mom anticipated. He was 18 years old when he died. She was not happy about that. It was like a little mail-in tadpole. She was real upset with me. My brothers died within 6 months. Mine lasted 18 years. So that was pretty good. But so yeah, after I settled on cartoons, it's just been going and going, and here we are on a workshop tour talking about carving into pots. But yeah, so.
Do you ever think about using a different medium than clay?
Yes, I only took like 3 printmaking classes, which I'm not sure why. I feel like I couldn't fit a lot of classes in because I had sculpture, so I was like, okay, I gotta take like 2 of everything. But I wish I would have taken more printmaking classes, and I've got some more pictures of stuff on my computer, but it definitely would have pushed this further quicker. I think it I took a break from this for a while, so I was like, but again, it also has to do with making money too. So whenever I got out of school, I was like, okay, I need money. I don't want to work at this place. I don't want to work for anybody else. I know that. So how can I also do what I love but also make a living? And it's kind of hard to do those 2 things at the same time. I don't even know if I want to anymore at this point, you know, but I still love it. But I think that, you know, having a creative outlet, that would be like, I want to do printmaking for a hobby. I think that would be really cool to do some of those things. I really want to get back into, I loved flame working. Again, I got more pictures on the slideshow, but I flame worked some of these little tiny spiders. And I'm terrified of spiders. I absolutely cannot stand them. And so I was like, if I do this, maybe I'll work through my fear of spiders. Didn't work, but it was still fun. So yeah, I think that I've also thought about doing this with actual printmaking, like printing with my actual cups and stuff. Still not tried it yet. I'm waiting. I think, well, I shouldn't say this, but Amica's coming out with a new product that is a print type of thing. Don't tell them I said that. But I'm gonna try some of that with that type of material. So we'll see if that goes anywhere.
Is it the printing?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah, they
Did they already?
I think
Oh, they did. Oh, okay, good. I didn't want them to get on me about that. I know that Speedball has. Do they have? I think Speedball has some stuff too.
And then not a people that you can just do the regular,
Oh,
yeah, do the regular and just cut it out, so it will be like soft, and then you can grab with your hands.
that's a great idea. Okay, alright. Sweet. I like that. Cool. Yeah, so I think I also built out my my camper that I live in now. If anybody sees a big orange pumpkin somewhere in one of these parking lots, that's my camper. So I feel like woodworking was a big passion of mine at one point, so I was doing a lot of furniture making, and my partner, his name's Austin Coudray, he's at the Archie Bray residency right now in Helen, Montana, and he's making a lot of clay furniture and different things like that. And so I'm very inspired to make, I'm like, oh, maybe I could do some carved clay furniture or something. So there are a lot of fun outlets. I feel like this can be translated in so many different ways, and I'm excited to kind of see. I did a lot of wood burning at one point, so I think it can translate into all kinds of mediums and things like that. But yeah, now you can start to see where it gets a little confusing. Things start to get a little weird, and so this kind of matches with this one. Where that purple is, that's where that little line, that wiggly line is. Eventually that's gonna look like this right here. And just with this interaction, I think this is the same, oh good, it's the same one, sweet. But then you can really tell. But you can start to see some of that negative where I'm going to be carving away that background to really pop forward that foreground. The color comes on very last, so I'll do the outline, then I'll do the halo around everything, which is what I'm doing right now, and then I'll start to carve away the background. Tools. If anybody likes carving tools, Diamond Core tools, here's my plug for the evening, besides Amico. Diamond Core tools, you can get 10% off with code SAnderson10. So yeah, go crazy. Also, if you know a woodworker or you are a woodworker, just make a stick, drill a hole, and buy the tips. They're only $19 for 2 of these. It'll save you some money. Yeah, so these are 4 of my favorites. I started off using the FP4 and the FP1. These are both really fine tipped ones. Let's see if you can see them a little closer. I'll pass these around too so y'all can see them a little bit closer. But they're just really fine tipped, really tiny tools. And they're not so much like the Kimber tools, if you guys have seen those, where they're a little bit thicker and like round but bent. These are like knives where they're really sharp and bent at a corner, so it's like a knife, cutting with a knife with these. So I'll pass some of these around, and I have quite a few in here from all of my workshop adventures, so I'll pass a couple of these around. There's 2 of those. And then my other favorite 2 are to carve away the negative space in the background. These are a little bit wider. The purple one has got some angles to it, and this blue one's a little bit just more looped. So these are pretty fun too. I'll start over here. Sweet. So those are the 4 that I like to use a lot. When I first started, I used this little guy, the Kemper Wire Stylus tool. And it's even smaller than all those. The reason I like this one is because it has a depth control to it. The other ones you can just carve straight through those. So that's why I had a hard time switching from this one to this one for a while, just because I couldn't carve all the way through. My lines were a lot more consistent with this one. I'll pass this one out too if you want to check that out. That one's like $5 compared to 40, so it's nice. But also it breaks like every week for me instead of these last a few months. So it can help me in the long run for sure. That's still drying. So oh, was there a question? Oh, you're good. If anybody, again, I can talk a lot, so just talk over me.
So how dry is the clay?
Yes.
How quickly do you wash through these?
Yeah. So if your clay is bone dry, you can still carve into them, but you might go through your tool in half the time. So I try and carve on things. This one you can still kind of see. Might stick to my hand a little if I grab it, but we'll try. So you can still kind of see some of that glossiness happen, maybe a little bit. Maybe from up here you can see it, but it's a little glossy still. And so I, painted on top of a layer already, but I want to have my piece around like hard leather hard, not so much on the soft side, because if you add underglaze on top of that, it's going to get even softer. So you just want to make sure that it's a little bit on the harder side. I will pass around this guy. It's in the greenware stage, so if you guys feel free to just give it a squish. But this one is a lot. Once this dries, I'll pass this around so you can kind of feel it too. But it's definitely like the perfect Hershey candy bar right off the shelf. That's what I want to carve into, or what I want to paint onto. Whenever I carve onto it, I want it to be like a 5-year-old Hershey candy bar, where it's got that white film on it. That's what this is. The white film. Yes, yeah. Yeah, that one that's being passed around has little feet on the bottom.
I hate to tell you, the white is just the cocoa butter coming up after the chocolate gets too
Oh
hot.
my god.
It's perfectly fine. It's
Well,
nothing.
whenever that cocoa butter comes out, that's when you can carve it.
Just means it's out of temper.
That's cool. I never knew that. But yeah, so if you carve into something a little bit more on the wet side, you'll get it gunked up in your tool a little bit, which, it is what it is. But it's harder to keep a consistent line if I use these especially. So if it's on the harder side, and I, can wait a little bit longer for that, I'm going to get a much more consistent line. and it's not going to be so aggressive on my tool too if I'm at that stage. Any other questions you guys have?
Your initial pass that you're making,
Mhm.
do you put a pattern on there, or do you just freehand draw
Great
it? Or?
question. I'll do that on this one when it gets done drying. I'll show you how I transfer some of those. Whenever I get one of the templates back, I'll show you guys how I do that. But I just place the paper over top of it, and I use my very expensive wooden stick on the end of this, and I trace around the template on the back of that. It is kind of hard to see if you're not like in a bright light, but it leaves just enough of like a little indentation where you can follow that line whenever you're carving it afterwards. But yeah, so I like to do that with my initial characters, and then everything else in the background is freehand. I like to go about it in a way where I make my compositions beforehand and I'll collage everything. So I've got my papers around and I'll cut up a bunch of different shapes, like all these things that I have in the background, like this tall cactus here, and then I've got a weird moon rock thing with an alien tail wrapping around it, and then I've got a spaceship and some prickly pears and stuff. Those I all have in my head already from doing this a million times, but whenever I first started, I would cut out little templates and I would just spread them all over a table, and I would mix them together, and I'll show you guys whenever I get that back of kind of how I compose that scene, and then I can kind of get it in my head, like, okay, you know, every other thing, this is really tall here, this can be really short here, tall, short, and just add a bunch of contrast and movement with that, and that's kind of how I get that scene together in my head. But whenever I first was starting, I didn't really, you know, it was very stressful to like put that first mark on the piece. I was like, I'm gonna mess this up completely. So it was nice to have the confidence of the paper first to lay down the collage and get a scene there, and then I could carve on top of that. But eventually I started to realize that it would get pretty stagnant if I kept doing that over and over. It didn't look like it flowed together very well because I'm just like shakily like drawing this. Oh my god, I don't want to mess this up. And so once I relaxed a little bit and just let that go, and I was like, oh, I could just freehand in this. Like, it's a very simple shape. I can just freehand that in. And that's when it started to kind of loosen up a little bit for me. But before I was like, oh, I have to get it exactly perfect on here. It just doesn't look as good if I do it that way.
Did you always use that kind of clay? Did you ever use earthenware or anything else?
If I use anything with grog in it, it tends to like pull on that tool a little bit. Yeah. Just like different colors and stuff. I used to use, on a few of them, I would use a dark clay body, like brown bear or something like that. I would use, and it changed my color palette quite a bit, and so I think that was something that I really enjoyed, the punch of the white with that being so contrasted with my dark reds. I think that's where I originally started, was like really dark reds and a really bright white, and then I tried to switch and do a really bright red on a dark clay body, and it didn't have that same punch to it for some reason. I was like, I don't like this as much. But I think if I go back, and that's on my list of things to do, is to go back and try like a black clay. I think Amico's coming out with another one. I hate being Amico's poster child, but they just give me stuff. I'm like, all right, I'll try. But they've came out with like chocolates of clay. I think it's like dark chocolate, milk chocolate, whatever, white chocolate. And so they gave me some of the dark chocolate to try out in clay form. So it will change the color palette for sure.
How does it taste like?
How's it taste? I'll let you know. We'll try it. Has anybody seen the cream cheese throwing videos?
Yes.
I mean, that's a good, they could label it cream cheese. Yeah, so I think that's something that I'm also very heavily influenced, is the color. And so I think that having some certain colors right now that I'm really interested in, I kind of just follow whatever color changes for me for the day. Like one day I woke up and purple was really interesting to me, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get the violet, and I'm gonna paint some alien spaceships on there and paint those purple. So I'm just kind of interested in whatever's calling to me for the week, and then I'll change it. But yeah, right now the chartreuse, the violet, and any orange put together, I'm like, that's a good combo. Does anybody else need to see any tools? Did we hit everybody? tools around here? Cool. Awesome. I'm almost done with this initial outline. Also, just yell at me whenever I don't know what time I need to be done with whatever, but I'll try and make everything work here. Cool. I'm gonna start doing the negative outline. Does everybody kind of understand what I mean by the negative space versus positive space? So positive space is going to be this stuff right here, all the color, all this within my piece here, that's got color on it. I claim that as the positive space, the first layer, the foreground, everything in front, and then everything behind that, the negative space, that white in the background, all of that is the negative space. And so whenever I think again about that composition, I'm thinking about the 50-50 rule in printmaking. So you want to have as much positive space as there is negative space. So you want both of those to kind of equal out. If I had, say I had another big moon rock right here, and I had something else covering here and here, and it was kind of taking over, you know, the foreground or that positive space was taking over one area more so than another, maybe I'm not totally hitting that 50-50 rule, and it looks just, I mean, you know, it might look fine, but it just might be off a little bit in one area. So I try and get that really even and leave enough spacing around things where you can see it, see where things pop out, gives it enough contrast in those certain areas. And that's something that I've struggled with, especially with having a composition that's from the ground up, where things are growing from the ground. And so in some of these books here on the table, excuse me, I think there's a pattern book over here that's really cool, and we can pass those around too, or later whenever we're up and moving around, you can check those out. But I've got another botanical book back there. I'm very inspired by tattoos, line work, different things like that, the way things are collaged onto each other. And so that book back there shows more of a stylized, like things in space rather than things being built from a ground up type of composition. And so I think that's, thank you. Anybody else need to see that cup? Do we make it all the way around? I can stick it back in this box whenever you're done. So I think there's a couple of different ways to compose a scene and where to place things and where not. So again, mine like sprout. I like to think that they're growing from the ground. And so whenever I'm trying to get things in the top part, it's kind of hard to get things to like get from all the way up here, from down here all the way up here. And that's one big reason why I put that little spaceship in there, because it can fill that space a lot easier with that 50-50 rule. So I can, like up there, it's a little bit bare up at that top, so I I could fit a couple more things in there, but it's a little hard whenever it's sprouting.
Do you put underglaze on this one?
I do not. This is which one is this? I think this is I think it's the chartreuse glaze from Amico. And I think it's I don't know if it's the celebration line or a satin or a celebration line, something like that. But they very much look like an underglaze with just a clear coat over top, which you can also do too. My favorite clear glaze to use is the HF9 zinc-free clear from Amico. Any zinc-free clear I think is really good because it doesn't muddy up the surface. Sometimes the zinc ones kind of cloud some of that. But that's another thing I'll talk about too while I start to carve this away. I don't like to glaze the outside of my pieces because I like the gritty, matte texture on the outside, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's horrible. But I love the grittiness, and so I use what's called liquid quartz. I'll pass this around too. Has anybody heard of liquid quartz?
Oh, yeah.
Seen that? I know, it's blowing up
Super
on Instagram.
expensive.
I know. So I will give you a hint. If you just go to Lowe's and get a tile sealer that's food safe for your countertops, almost the same.
Love you.
So it technically has to be food safe if you're putting it on a countertop.
Everybody's like, no
So you might try that out too. I just found that from somebody too, and I was like, why did I not think of that before? Because I used the tile sealer like in a bathtub to put on sculptures, but it's not food safe. So just using the food safe one, it's the same thing.
I've been like looking into this for weeks because I really want liquid quartz, but
Yeah.
like $7 to ship it.
They are getting it. I think they're getting
I
a
know,
distributor
but-
soon, but I
I'm
don't
waiting
know.
like a year.
I know exactly.
But the thing I'm curious about is the nanoparticle size, because the liquid quartz is like nano sized, and I don't know what the countertop ones are. That's, yeah, I'm trying to find out. I've asked like 3 chemists and no one will respond.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm like,
we need to come to you for that, 'cause I don't know what the heck that is, but that's a good idea.
So it's a countertop sealer?
I mean, I haven't tried it fully yet. I haven't tested anything, but if you're sealing a countertop or things like that, that has to be food safe. Again, that's a really good point. Those are the things that I don't think about. So that's a good point. I will say I only use liquid quartz right now until I do some testing with the countertop ones. Who knows? But you're not going to be licking the outside of a cup. So I'm like, yeah, good enough. Good enough for me.
What do you use it for?
So the I should tell you what it is. It just seals the outside of your piece. So if I have like this one, I haven't done yet because I forgot to glaze the handle, so I got to refire this one. But on the other ones going around, I painted on there. Some of them you can spray on there, but I've noticed I lose a lot of the liquid quartz if I spray it. So I just put it into a cup, paint it onto my piece, let it soak in for an hour. And if you have any water and you want to throw it on the surface of that cup, it should repel, like it shouldn't soak into the piece. Yeah, exactly. And it beads off the surface. It's really, really cool. It's like a magic trick.
Like 21st century terrace edge.
Yes, exactly. I like that. Yeah, so it just, like if I have Hawaiian punch and I spill it on the outside of my white background porcelain piece, or this bowl, this one's also sealed with liquid quartz. It looks like nothing's in there. It looks like it's just whatever. I could spill spaghetti sauce and it'll stain it forever. I've eaten a lot of pad thai out of that bowl and it's never stained it. So, and the liquid quartz helps with all of that. So yeah, I think it's a pretty cool product. It's pretty cool. I don't know if I'd trust the tile sealer on the inside of a bowl, but I would on the outside of a cup. So those are.
Do you use it before you fire or after?
So it's a post-firing application. So whenever I fire all of my stuff to a high cone 5, once I get it out, I sand it with a 600 grit, whatever, underwater, sand that down, get it nice and smooth, and then I'll paint on the liquid quartz, let it set for like an hour, and it's good to go.
Is
So
it
it's a
water
post-
soluble?
I said it was
Yes.
on the,
Yeah.
I just read it on the bottle, yes.
Yes.
Probably when it's still liquid though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think.
But once it cures.
Right. Yeah. So it's a pretty cool product. I mean, if you're using, like, I obviously use it for a living, so the $70 is worth it to me. But I'm like, if there is an alternative option.
You're not using the clear glaze because you don't want the gloss.
Yeah. If I could find a matte clear, I'd be all over it. But I cannot. Even low fire, I can't find a matte anything. So I've just kind of switched over to this. I used to spray on my glaze and I'd water it down and spray it, and that was okay. But the glaze also changes the color of the glaze, underglaze sometimes. I also can pass this around if anybody's curious on what it looks like without glaze versus with glaze. This is the HF9 zinc-free clear on the right side of the 2 tiles of color testing. That's my first test tile in like 7 years, so I'm very proud of myself. These are all my test tiles. Every cup I make, I'm like, it's good enough. I'll just spend way too long on this stuff. So yeah.
One of the pieces, you have a very rough texture to slender glazes. There's like cracks like apple or some threading.
Say that again?
There's some like rough patches, like the underglaze was a lot textured.
Yeah.
So do you like mixing clay?
Am I mixing any clay to get that texture? Do you have any specific ones that you're looking at that you're like? Oh, where it's got some of this like alligator type of skin stuff? Yeah. So those I came upon by accident, but I loved it happens with the yellows and the browns mostly. I don't know why it happens, but I have a brown and a yellow that do it quite a bit. And once I figured out how to control it, I loved it because then I could put it on like as alligator paints or like boots or different things. So I was really excited about getting some different textures with it. But I think that comes about because of just the longevity of the glaze itself or the underglaze itself. I kept those and I kept mixing them and mixing them and mixing them with other browns, other yellows, other browns. And so I think eventually it just breaks down over time. So I liked those for those reasons. And then I started to steer clear of those just because, you know, it can chip off and other things. But if you seal it with the tile sealer, the liquid quartz, it's usually okay. But I thought they were pretty fun to just like add a little bit of texture with that. But I came upon it by accident when I was like, I mixed this way too many times and it's just starting to break down. Does anybody have that sulfury smell in any of the reds or underglazes? Just a couple drops of bleach. That's all it takes. Just a couple drops of bleach. And if it gets really thin, if you add CNC gum, or Darvan, any of that will thicken it up really quick. And then if it gets, what else? Because of the sulfury smell and the bacteria in that, there's a scientific way to explain it that I don't know how to explain, but if you don't add tap water, if you're trying to thin it down, add distilled water. If you have them out and about in your studio, make sure there's no sunlight hitting them directly. If you have a fridge, keep them in the fridge because they'll last way longer in the fridge. So yeah, I have like a giant window in my studio with like 50 bottles all over the table, direct sunlight, and they're all, so yeah, I'm like, I gotta move those. So those are some tips for underglaze too.
You weren't talking about that texture on the glaze on top of the underglaze, were you just now?
No, we were talking about.
I'm talking about the lemon peel thing.
Yes.
Yeah, so what causes that?
The ones that I've noticed with those pants specifically, I just mixed colors one too many times.
Oh, that's what
and
you were talking
yeah.
about. On your color palette, some of the colors like that blue green, it looks like some of it bubbled up.
Was
like
it on the
lemon peel?
interesting? Was it with the glaze over top of it?
Yes.
Yes. So the glaze, sometimes the glaze, if you get it too thick on there, it does.
Is that what it is?
That's what I've
Glaze
noticed.
or the underglaze?
The glaze for me is what I've noticed on top of it. But
My
I
current
don't know.
problem.
Okay. Do you get it just with the underglaze?
Just certain colors, like if I put it clear over the porcelain, it's beautiful.
But with the
But
underglaze.
with some colors,
It's the
makes it
underglaze.
like a lemon skin and it's unusable.
Yep.
It's
Is it
hard.
it is whenever you're putting glaze on top of the underglaze. I think that's what it is. Is sometimes it's the glaze and the underglaze just don't fit together, and it's so irritating. But I have had little problems with the HF9 zinc free, and
That's what exactly
is it
what I was
really?
using, yes.
Was it pretty thick?
The glaze wasn't
normal?
thick, but the underglaze
Yeah,
might have been too.
might have been a little thick. Interesting. Did
Was
you?
it turquoise? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that
Yeah.
was one of the colors.
Like
it was
Yeah.
green blue or whatever.
Yeah, no, I
Interesting.
got a tip to, instead of the turquoise, to mix white with the blue green and it won't do it. It's the turquoise.
I've never used a turquoise, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, at home, at mid-range, at low fire it's fine, but at mid-range it'll just bubble and, yeah, do that.
Weird.
It's
I've
so
never
frustrating. Yeah,
You should email. Let them know. Hey. get it
yeah.
on. I've not used the turquoise, but that is the thing. It's,
The black
And
is
black.
awful.
Yeah.
I use the jet black, and I've not noticed too many issues, but also I don't use a lot of it. Yep, sometimes that is the kicker, and I think with that brown too, I've noticed other people saying it in other colors that have some of that yellow or the brown, like an ochre to it. It might be a material that got, something in the manufacturing, because I've heard it from a few people that that's happened. So I don't even know if it's from me mixing it too many times, but that's just what I've assumed, or it's too old, or so, it's one of those things where it's, it can be pretty frustrating sometimes to try and figure things out. But I've noticed the blue-green specifically, you said you've mixed it and you didn't have any problems with the white and the blue-green.
Yeah,
I've noticed that the most popular color is blue-green, which is in that bowl, and that one I haven't had many problems with that one.
Oh, that's the color.
Weird.
I'll never touch it again.
how I feel on a few colors. That brown, I don't want to touch it ever again.
Question?
Yeah.
Can I ask, so, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but you're layering other colors on top of an already painted color from the,
Yeah.
so you leave your whole background color, and then you're doing underglaze for the next color?
I sure am.
Okay.
Yep. Once I get this kind of carved away a little bit more so you can see it a little bit better from up there, I'll start to paint on the secondary colors.
But
I
you're
like to.
leaving your background orange on there and just doing it on top?
Yep. And I thought for sure whenever I first started doing this, I was gonna have to like carve that away and paint over top of that. But if you put it on thick enough, I use these little tiny. I hate promoting Amazon, so I'm not going to. I got these bottles, not from Amazon. I got them. But they're just little squeeze bottles, and I apply the color right on top of this color. I've done it with the blue, like this one. I did that bright orange right on top of the blue, and the white right on top of the blue, and it covered it completely. I did 2 layers with that. I did one pass with it and let it be pretty thick, and if I still saw color through that, then I'd do it again if I needed to. But usually I only do like one pass with these squeeze bottles. I don't water anything down in those, just straight underglaze right on top of it, and it tends to work out pretty good. Yeah.
Do you ever have trouble with the rims being too thick or too thin and looking off after the best?
With the edges of things. Not too much. I like to do a little light brush of things to let whenever, I'll show you on this, whenever I finish the edge of something, I'll carve at an angle. And so like on this top part here, you can't see it too well, but it's got like a little boogered up surface. And so if I angle it at a 45-degree angle along that top side, it smooths out that edge, and it's like smoothing that into the background, or that white space in the background, and it doesn't flake up at all. If I do like a just straight carve down, it still leaves an edge there, but if I angle it just slightly at a 45-degree angle and smooth that in, it doesn't create a sharp edge to it.
That's very subtle.
Yeah, it tends to help a little bit, and sometimes I forget and I mess up. And then I can go back and just sand that down, and it doesn't do it after that too. But yeah, I think I found that maybe a couple times happening in the beginning from that curving up, and if I just angle it a little bit, it's okay. But this little cleanup edge around the outside really helps set that out into like this stamped shape. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Any other questions you guys have?
Does this have that liquid quartz stuff?
Yes, it does. I'm pretty sure.
I have a question regarding this piece right here. Was that put together after?
Yeah, so I started doing more tile work. I got real bored with cup after cup after cup. And so I started doing these tiles and those tiles. And I did a series when I was a resident out in Montana last summer. I did a bunch of layered tiles on top of each other, and it's just epoxied. And I've got those little like layered balls underneath each of the tiles to make it set apart from itself a little bit. And just epoxy, let that set. It's got a couple D hooks on the back, I think. So that just hangs on the wall.
What kind of epoxy?
Ooh, like easy 7,000 or something. Yeah, something like that. I'm not really. I mean, most of the ones that if it takes 30 minutes or more to cure, it's good. If it takes 5 minutes to set or less, I don't trust it. So if I have to set it for like 24 hours, great. It'll probably hold forever. But yeah, I don't do anything less than like 5 minutes.
Have you heard about the Bray epoxy? Just heard about that. Yeah.
What is it?
Bray, Archie Bray.
Oh.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I should know about that, but I don't.
So I don't know if it's
Weird.
like epoxy sculpt or
I'll have to
whatever.
ask you about that. I'll be there in a couple months. So that's cool.
Bray clay or
Cool.
anyway. So.
Yeah, awesome. I'll have to check that out. No, I had no idea.
Do you fire with 2
With 2
or how do you get glaze on the bottom?
I just fire. Well, so I'm lazy and I don't like to trim things. But if I do trim them, like that helps me get that glaze on the bottom. There's a few somewhere around here that I do that. But the underglaze doesn't really stick to the kiln shelves. If it does, it's because there's glaze in the kiln shelves already. So I've got new kiln shelves that don't stick to it.
Yeah, and for the glossy units,
Yeah.
Apply clear glaze over it.
Yeah, so the handle has that clear glaze over top of it, and then the tile, that I just add, I take this, add the glaze in that, and glaze that. But that's done on this, not on the other part.
And is this beautiful, is this glaze or underglaze
That's
with?
glaze.
Okay.
This
That's
part is underglaze with clear, and this part is Tangelo Celadon. So those are two different ways to look at it. So they both look pretty similar. It's very subtle, but
Yeah, it's cool.
This handle is pinched?
yes, I love to pinch handles. I don't know if there's enough time to demo a handle, but I know a lot of people have questions about that too. But yes, I do pinch out handles. Again, I'm a lazy potter and I don't like to wait for my gold handles to dry to attach them. So if I pinch them, I can just attach them right then. So that's what I like to do too. Does anybody
Do the
pinch
handles
them?
last?
Good question. I would attach a handle to this one right now. I usually wait until I trim it and paint it, and then I can attach the handle. I don't like to get underglaze on the handle. I feel like it's way harder to get that cleaned off afterwards. So I feel like if I scrape off the underglaze, slip and score all of that, and attach the handle, I get a cleaner connection. I don't get any underglaze on the handle.
And then you do the rest of the pattern.
And then I carve and everything else. I attach the handle, put that in my damp box, wait like overnight, and then I can get that back out. So all of my process really depends on my damp box. If I didn't have that, I probably could use porcelain, to be honest, because it would break everything or crack everything. Cool. Okay, well I've got some of that carved out. It'd take me forever to fully get this done, so I won't work too much longer on that part. But you can start to see some of that negative space with that white showing through. So now I'm going to separate it even more and apply some of this green on top. This is the chartreuse. This gauge for the tip is around 18 gauge. And then I have a pin that I stick in the top when I'm not using it, and that is about a 20 gauge, I think. And so that just helps it keep it from getting clogged. My friend has the air pin, and I stole her box. So I wish I had an air pin. I should get one, but these I feel like work pretty good for me right now. I don't have to squeeze too much. I just squeeze a little bit, and then I drag it, and I outline it first. And I'm carving deep enough where it creates a moat around the outside of it, and so it doesn't fall into that moat too often. But it definitely does. And if that happens like on this little tiny part, it might end up falling into that crack. Maybe not. But if it did, I just let it dry. I'm a big believer in waiting until I mess up fully and then finish it all at the end, because I'm gonna mess up again, so I might as well just wait and finish it all at the end. So I'll do that, I'll outline everything, and then I give it a good squeeze and fill that in. But if I didn't outline that first, it's gonna be kind of hard to get that all the food. Has anybody done sugar cookies?
Yep.
Anybody flooded cookies? It's the exact same thing.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, this is exactly right.
Exactly the same thing. Yep. I've never done it with cookies before, but
You could.
I had somebody like, oh yeah, you can make cookies. Yeah. Oh, I could eat them. That'd be great. So I missed a little bit. I had that go a little bit in the eye, like just ever so slightly right there. So I'll just wait and carve that out later.
So on like this piece, there's the underglaze and then there's obviously glaze around it. So how are you getting that glaze up bottle?
Same thing, just this bottle. If I mess up with glaze though, it's hard to get that cleaned out. So I have to be real slow with the glaze part on that. If it spills into like one of those carved sections already, it stains it a little bit. So I have to just be really careful with that and try not to spill anything. Yeah.
Do you think wax could work?
Oh yeah, probably. That's a great idea. I should try that.
You don't need to, obviously you don't need to.
No, that's a good idea. That's another thing I had some students ask about. The blue-green, whenever you're carving with the blue-green, your hand leaves residue behind. And so I know some people will take wax or like a shellac spray and spray it so you don't carry that around. But you can't add glaze on top of that. You'll have to fire it and get all that off first and then apply color on top of that. I've tried applying the secondary color after bisque when it's on bisque. But if I mess up and I get it into the recesses of anything, then it's just, I can't clean it up very well. So I like to do it all of it on greenware. So that's what it starts to look like. So it looks like it's raised and bubbly right now, but it's not. It won't stay like that. Underglaze settles, and so if I do want anything raised up on the edges, I have to use the glaze if I want it to stay raised like that. And that is the process. Okay, well I'm going to pause on this and show you how I'll go backwards. And also, if I apply my color on whenever it's too wet, when my piece itself is too wet and I stand it up, it's all going to run off it. If my underglaze is too runny, it's all going to run off it. It's going to be a miserable time. So if anything, I want my bottles to be a little bit thicker. Add a little Darvan and those or something and make it a little bit thicker so it stays. So there's that. If anyone else pass that around and check that out, more than welcome to. Any other questions?
What are you marketing your work?
Marketing?
Ooh,
yes, right here. I do
People
have
go
a
to
book.
you.
Yes.
I online.
Yeah, so I've got a website. I started that in 2019, and I have a few galleries that I sell out of. That's not as lucrative. I used to do craft fairs. I used to do local coffee shops. I would do pretty much everything possible that I could get my hands on at the beginning. And then whenever time progressed, I was like, okay, I'm a little tired. I can't say yes to everything, which is a good problem. So then I would only pick and choose like 1 or 2 craft fairs a year that were really good, or I would only choose 1 or 2 galleries to do every year. I've got my website, different things like that, 1 or 2 local places that can carry stuff. But now that I'm kind of getting onto the teaching route and the workshop route, I knew when I started I didn't want to sell work to make a living, and so it just takes so much out of me. And I love the community aspect, eventually opening a studio and that type of thing is my passion, so I know that's eventually how I'm going to continue. So I'm not as worried right now about selling stuff to make a living. But my website is mainly how I started that process. And I still have it, still on there. But with marketing, I feel like that's kind of where I've started to find a little bit more of a niche, like online with Instagram and other types of platforms. I feel like that I accidentally stumbled into during COVID, and so that was like a total accident. I definitely put in the work beforehand to like make it there and make it available if I wanted to, if that took off. But that was definitely something that I owe, COVID for morbidly. It's just like I wouldn't have been able to market myself nearly as well if the whole country hadn't shut down, because everyone was online. Everybody was watching pottery videos. Everybody seemed to just be obsessed with it. And so I think just getting, also putting in the work, but just like getting lucky with the timing really helped like start my career in that way. And I think that was something, just learning more about marketing and how that works. I think that was definitely something too. And definitely the game is changing. Like, galleries are becoming, less and less important for emerging artists. Like, that's not as much how I get my name out there now. I can do it takes my time, but like Instagram, YouTube, all the social medias, it's, soul sucking, but it takes time and it's a job. It's definitely not super fun anymore, unfortunately, but it can be fun, and it's kind of what I'm trying to get back to, is like I was using it so much for marketing and different things like that. So now I'm trying to get more back into the fun side of things with it. But yeah, I think it's as a ceramic artist, we have to be the accountant and the marketer and all of the jack of all trades. So yeah, it can definitely.
When you choose your background color, is it because it's the color you're going to have the most?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So whenever I teach workshops, I start off everybody with a tile, and I'll have them painted all one solid color, kind of like this. and eventually they'll carve it all down to one tiny little thing, and then they'll put color over top of that. And I was like, that looks great, but you probably could have just not painted that background and just carved that and filled in the color. So the reason I have this whole background is because I don't know where things are going yet, and there's so much of it in the background. You know, if I were to go back and if I were to carve this first and then fill in all those lines and everything with that color that I want, if I want all different colors, maybe that's worth it. But I just want it all to be that one orange color in the background. So yeah, that's the main color that I want for like my middle ground.
And then the halo is that same background color too.
Right. And I think, again, it's not necessary for me to have that halo effect in the background. I don't have any individual lines in anything, so I could keep all of my designs in there without it. And I know a lot of amazing sgraffito artists that do that without that second line. But I think it just, I don't know, it just adds a little something to it that it really is exciting and makes it just look like a little bit more pop arty. I don't know, I kind of enjoy it.
It's more like a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're pretty impressively freehanding that.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time, and that's why I switched to this Kemper wire tool. And so to get a straight line, you'll kind of notice that I was doing that by moving my hand and my piece, not my tool. And so that kind of helps. I can do the bottom of this on the banding wheel and carve it that way, but if I were to do the top, it's too light, it'll push over on the top, so I do it with my hand. Also, stretching, remembering to stretch. So, let's get this on to my piece. I guess I'll do this one. Classic cowboy frog. This one I doodled at I think it was at some show somewhere, and I again got bored and started doodling, and this came up. There's a few renditions of this guy. It's pretty silly. So I'll just put this around here. You'll notice that it's kind of crinkled up at the bottom. I'm gonna ignore that. Just keep my thumb right here and start to trace this outline.
Is it like just copy your paper?
Yeah, I'll just use whatever paper I have laying around. I've got attendance sheets, I've got all kinds of stuff. And then whenever it gets crinkly and old and it's got holes poking through it, I'll make a new one. Like right there, it's got a hole poking through it. So I'll just, whenever it gets too bad, I'll make a new one.
Is that tip rubber?
Nope, just like a sharp little end. It's not super sharp though, it's dull. But if I have something that, rubber would be fine, I think, but you might not get as much of an indentation there. I know some people that have a harder time seeing this afterwards. They'll take their pencil and just outline it again, just so you can see it a little bit better. The graphite will burn off in the kiln, no problem. So you can do that too.
So is your indention going into the clay or just the underglaze? Or kind of both?
I think maybe a little bit of both. I'm doing it pretty light, but it also depends on how the moisture content in your clay. If it's really wet, then you're going to see it probably all, you're going to see that quite a bit, which might not be super helpful when you're carving because it's going to affect your line. Like if you don't hit that exactly right where you've traced it, you'll see some of that. So I try and do it light enough where if I want to adjust something, this is like my trial and error stage. This is where I can kind of mess up and it's not a big deal. So if I do it light enough, I can kind of, make some mistakes and fix that afterwards.
So is it clay disc or greenware?
Nope, this is still greenware, yeah.
You don't deal with this. Is there a reason?
To do it on this?
To do it on greenware?
I wouldn't be able to carve into a bisque piece.
Okay.
I think that might be a little hard on the tool.
Yeah, I thought you were just carving away the
Right.
glaze.
Oh, right. Yeah, I physically carve quite a bit of the clay and the underglaze away. And I get that question. That's a good question. I get that asked a bit in workshops whenever it's a 2-day workshop and we're making work to do the first day and then to carve it the second day. People are like, how thick should I make this? And I didn't even think about that beforehand, but I throw every piece pretty much like 1/4 of an inch thick and then I carve on top of that. So they're pretty thin and I don't carve that much away though. It's only just like, a light layer off the top. But you can still see, a chunk of it taken away. So, if it was any thicker than that, then I might throw it a little thicker, but I forget that. And so that, if I can't fall through, There's a bag up there. So if you can kind of see, not really, but you know. Yeah, pass that around. It's kind of right there. I'll just pass that around. You guys can kind of see that a little better in person. But I don't hit every single line with that. I leave some, you know, I can freehand some stuff in the background too, and that makes it a little bit easier.
So when you're carving and you slip out the needle and you
Make
never
a little
look back
mistake.
into an area that you're planning on,
Yeah.
you go back in and touch that up, or just say screw it.
Never make a mistake. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, if I make a mistake or if I carve on or whatever, I wait till the very end, see if I can even see if it's, you know, any mistakes are made. Can you tell that there's any mistakes in this right here, right off the bat? Can you see anything? Well, I can. Because if you could see, I totally missed an entire piece of the arm. I didn't paint that in there. And so I'm like, I've taken this around to so many workshops and I just saw it like yesterday. I was like, wow, I totally missed that. So sometimes I'm like, I didn't even see that myself. But, yeah, right, exactly. But I'll go back and I'll stare at things, and I'll just get my pint of underglaze. I'll get a tiny little brush, and I'll go back in and touch up little things if I've messed up. If I carve physically a big chunk of that away, I'll try and go back and like smooth it out enough where if I put the color back in, it doesn't look like a big chunk was taken out. So I'll try and smooth that down and then paint over top. And then carve that again, so it just looks a little bit lower than the rest of it. And you can't really tell, but that's I'll try and fix things like that. But most of the time, I don't even see it until it's too late and I've already found it. I'm like, oh well, great. Cool. How much more time do I have?
40 minutes.
Sweet. Okay. I'm gonna see if my computer likes me yet. Maybe. Maybe not. Okay. You want me to pass it back or put it up here?
Everybody wants to see what you missed.
Yes. Yes. Check it out. Check out where I messed up.
Didn't see it the first time.
I know. Oh, it's so fun. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about some of these old designs while that's booting up. Got burgers. Plug in. Alright, I'll take like 2 minutes and get this set up, and then we'll get rolling again.
Oh, please.
Thank you for the charger. That saves me.
I knew something would happen.
I would love to. Yeah. Good.
I think it's vintage Apple products. Yes. I think all of mine have aged now.
Is that okay?
Sure.
That'll give you
Okay, so we're gonna try to work I can always pull up one picture, but it never lets me get all of them.
There you go.
Okay, you did it. That was so much fun.
I actually have a quick question about the laser quartz.
Yes.
How long does that bottle last you?
Oh, the bottle itself. That's the first time I've got that big of a bottle, and
So she says I was gonna buy it.
yes, that one was like $200, I think. $200 for that one.
Yeah.
And then I think so. I had a disaster, and I accidentally spilled some. I think I wasted about $100 for that. It hurt. It hurt. But I have a smaller bottle, like the smaller size, that's like $75. That lasts me like I do it by piece, and I think that lasted me like 100 pieces, give or take. So this would probably be like 300 pieces, give or take. But if you're soaking it in it, that also kind of, but I just brush it on. I was spraying it, and that wasted a lot of it. If you do spray it, put like a pan underneath it, and that'll catch it. You can reuse it. But like maybe 300 pieces.
Do you use just a regular brush, or do you use a sponge brush?
Just a fan brush.
I've used it and put on like, gone through the dishwasher like dozens of times, and it's like still rock solid. Like,
I've used it for like a year and a half, and it's not broken down. Yes, it's
Awesome.
insane. I think it might be worth the money. I hate it.
that's your next console.
Well, actually, since they're in Australia, they won't do it or whatever because I've reached out. I'm like, hey, listen, I've got a lot of people like this product. We can't do it whenever it's, I don't know why, but they don't want to do it across the seas. So once they're here, though, I might be able to do something. But
Australians are very particular.
yes, for some reason. I don't know.
Because Americans are crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay, any other questions? I'll get back to this after I talk about this for a minute too, but any other questions before I jump over to more stuff that I kind of already touched on? Cool. Okay, so a little bit of background about my family. He does not know that this is the first slide, and he will not know this until I'm done with this whole tour. But I started off doing a lot of photos. I did photo, since I was very little. So I did photo in undergrad, and this was one of my first projects. My I think humor in general has just been a theme in most of my work. I love it. And my professor did not think it was that funny because he grew up in this time period where this was, you were getting these for your senior pictures and things. So he didn't think that my, 80s, 90s floating head photo shoot was very funny. But I did this with like all of my friends, and so I had one of my friends with all their cats, and their heads were floating in the background, all a bunch of different. So also my family are a family of gardeners, and so my brother has a greenhouse, my aunt has 2 or 3 greenhouses. Like we love to garden, any fresh herbs or anything like that. So he decided to make himself be Farmer Dan, and with all of his herbs here. He did have dreadlocks for like 7 years, all the way down his back. Just a great guy. Never wore shoes. It's really fun. Whenever I first started working with some of my designs and things, let's see if I can find it really quick. I got my first tattoo, was inspired also kind of by this picture. Oh, there it is. Nice. Oh, this was the first chicken that I ever did. Anybody raise chickens? Do any roosters? Man, they can be fun. So this was one of my first, I don't have that anymore, but I can pass this around. This was one of my first drawings, pomegranates. Couldn't care less about pomegranates. I just thought it looked interesting, whatever. And I grabbed that, and I grabbed like 20 other papers, and I gave it to my tattoo artist for my very first tattoo. This was also one of them, my blackberries, like a bunch of them. And I asked my brother and a bunch of other people in my family what they wanted to be represented by. As my first tattoo, I'm like, okay, it has to be so deep and meaningful and symbolic, whatever. And my brother said, you should do rosemary for me. He's got some rosemary he's holding. My mom wanted garlic. My aunt wanted blackberries. And so I've got some blackberries, some garlic. And then you can see the lovely pomegranate in the very middle of this tattoo. And she decided to take that pomegranate piece and make it the centerpiece of my tattoo. And I was like, and it was the day that I was getting the tattoo. I don't know if that's how it works, but apparently I was like, okay, I guess I have to get this stuff. And it was, it was good. I loved it, but just as your first tattoo, I feel like I put so much weight on that, and I had to have it perfect. And so once I got that and had the symbol on me that didn't really mean anything to me other than it just being pretty, it really started to break down some of those barriers of like, okay, I can just have pretty things, and that's okay too. So I think that's how I like to intro my brother here, is with this nice little photo shoot. Let's see if I can go the right way here. Cool. So along with these photo shoots, I did, my roommate, Sammy here, she put up with a lot, and she was my model for like everything. And so we went into this abandoned haunted house thing. I don't think we were supposed to be there. We got in this back room, we set up a bunch of chairs, found a picture of Jesus, put him next to the chairs, put her in the chairs. I had zero meaning behind these photo shoots, nothing. And so my whole theme for the semester, I wasn't telling anybody, but I was taking a bunch of random pictures of things. her here, a bunch of bugs. I got a bunch of dead bugs, put them all over, different stuff. Again, zero meaning behind it. And I presented it to my class each time, and I said, okay, this is my project, and I'm not going to tell anybody the meaning of any of these photos until the very end of the semester. And so I had people saying, oh, this is what it means, this is what it means, this is what it means. And then at the end of the semester, I said, it meant absolutely nothing to me, but it meant so much to you guys, and I think that is just so wonderful. So it just kind of played into a lot, interpretation. It's really a wonderful thing. So then I got into the foundational classes, and so I started doing more bronze casting, iron pours, lost wax castings, different things like that. And I'm really into a repeating theme in most of my work is contrast, movement, just mainly contrast in all forms, contrast in texture, contrast in line, in movement, all of those things, color, everything. And so I was really interested in the way that wax could be formed and the way I could kind of manipulate those things. And so I did a lot of mold making. I made a lot of molds of my hands and my face and my friends' faces and my friends' hands. And so roping everybody in that I could. And I started making some barnacle themed things, and which started leading into octopus things. And octopus are very interesting creatures to me. And so I made this, I don't know, maybe 2-foot octopus out of wax, and the mold had a crack in the bottom, and we placed it up on the table, and all the wax started pouring out, so we had to get a big chair and duct tape it together really quick. It was a lot of fun. So that was all some of the wax down at the very bottom. And then I started doing some miniature studies. I started getting into my thesis project. I was lucky enough where I could just spend my entire last semester working on just my one thesis project. I would not have been able to finish it without it. So I started doing some small studies on clay-related things, and so then I started working on my people, my ladies. And it just kind of, again, came out as cartoon-like. I had no background in sculpting faces. I had no background in any sort of thing along those lines. And so I was very inspired by Beth Kavner and other sculptors that did more human or animal-like things. And so just kind of going off of those people that I really enjoyed, this is kind of what came out from that. She was then being consumed by a giant octopus, and it was about, I think, she was about half of me, and then the octopus was the other half of me, so a good like 5'2", and the octopus was, same width as it was tall. And then if you can kind of tell in the background, I had a big, probably about as big as this wall here, of space covered in pictures of my roommate of doing different poses. And so it was in the back of our wood shop, and she had no idea, again, that I did that. And so she walked in one day and saw just a wall of her everywhere. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just sculpting. This was the second part to that 2-part. This was the land creature versus the sea creature, and so I had a lot of mushrooms and different things growing off of her. This was the octopus maquette and the bigger version. I also didn't have a professor the last 2 years of my career because he retired and they were just too cheap to hire somebody else. And so I had to kind of partner up with the clay department and the printmaking department and the glass department and the sculpture, everyone else but the sculpture department. And I didn't have anybody to tell me to make these thinner. They were very heavy. So after I got finished with these, I was like, oh, they'll fire lighter, it's fine. And they did a little bit, but they were still like 100 pounds each to lift. So that was not great. I learned a lot. I did segments, I hollowed things out best I could, let them dry slowly. It was a really good learning experience to kind of just go about all of this. I used who's the house paint? I think it's Martha Stewart. Yeah, cool, awesome, yes. I don't know why I thought that was the cooking lady.
Same thing.
Okay, well, there's that. So I did spray colored acrylic house paint. For the finishing final pieces, epoxied all that back together, cooled, epoxied everything, fired them in separate pieces, and eventually installed. There I was installing. There's the final piece. Beautiful. And the whole thing. So that is now in a collector's house in Michigan. Then I had to drive and install it, and he sends me pictures every now and again that, hey, they're still here. Because I also had to weld the structures that held them on the wall, so I was like, I hope my welds are good. So those got to hold. They were pretty good. I have a close-up of some of the spiders, and then I start going in that direction more after my pieces. So there's more in the glass shop. I did some glass blowing for about 3 years. That was really fun. I did some, now we're going back in time. So that was my very last thing that I did in college thesis. And now we're going to the very beginning again with all of my flame working things. This was before I got into the spiders. So I did a flame work project on just different native plants and things again, trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And then I started doing more spiders, and I found the greenhouse in the back of campus, and I took these spiders in there and took pictures, and yeah, it turned out.
So what are those made of?
This is flame worked glass. So it's, I forget what the type of glass is, borax, I don't know. Yes, the ones that don't have to be annealed. So most of the time if you're working on glass, you need to put it in the annealer so it cools down at a correct temperature so it doesn't bust. This glass, it doesn't need to do that. So you can just flame work with it and the temperature shock won't affect it whenever it cools back down. So you can do it with like an acetylene torch and do it, right here. So I got really interested in those, more printmaking, again, just trying to do different studies. I feel like nothing I did before my thesis was really that great. This was my first wood print. I had no idea what I was doing. I could not see positive space versus negative space. It was so confusing to me. And so I think that's why I really enjoy sgraffito, because I wanted to just analyze things. I wanted to know how to do it. And I feel like I really didn't know how to do it in printmaking. Some early pottery, just so fun. This was one of my first sgraffito pieces. I did two. One was the chicken and one was this turtle pot. So I had a lot of fun trying to figure out that negative versus positive space, teapots and such. Then I got really into photography again and exploring how I could use that to market my things and how I could get things to sell. And so I think I did like my first Etsy or something to sell a bunch of these, of course, blue pottery. Everybody loves the blue pottery. Oh, God. I did some sgraffito on this piece and I put it into the soda kiln and covered it up really good. So, didn't do a whole lot of soda. More blue. Ugh, love blue. I did a glaze calc class with Ted, and I made this glaze that can have this gross unicorn vomit if you do it really thin, or if you do it 2 dunks, it turns white. And so that was a really fun class to kind of experiment with the glazes and different things. Again, wheel throwing. This was one of my first wheel throwing classes and exploring different textures and things. My first show. This was a conglomerate of just everything back in the 16, 17 maybe, I don't remember, something like that. That was my final work there for my for the end of the glaze class. Then I started exploring with some slip transfers, again kind of getting into the mushrooms of things and more medicinal things again. Anybody tried slip transfers or anything like that? I really enjoyed that. This was the sad realization that Cone 10 was not going to work with underglazes. This was before my dreams were crushed. And yeah, how pretty whenever they're all in like bright colors, and then eventually brown. So nice and brown. Everybody was brown. It was great. That was one of the soda fired pieces, and that's how some of them started. That was more slips instead of underglazes. Anybody use slips? Anybody use slips? Awesome. I really like slips. I think they're a lot cheaper. I think you can make them a lot more in bulk and a little bit more inexpensive, but whenever I carved into slips, I feel like they would flake off a little bit more aggressively if they got too dry, and I feel like I have a little bit more flexibility and elasticity with the underglaze, so I switched over to that. This was, again, blue, so much blue, and getting more into that sgraffito. This was, I think, one of my first goes at the sgraffito after school. I think this was in like 2019, early 2019. More rabbits and things. I was teaching and I was just becoming the studio chair at the Indie Art Center and taking more photos, getting more into blocking out things, just exploring more and trying not to be too hard on myself about all these horrible things that I felt like I was making, but I was still exploring and experimenting with stuff. And this was my first studio ever. I really didn't have anything in college because I was a sculpture major and they didn't get their own spots, and so I felt like I never had just a place to fit in or just be. And so I took this, if you zoomed out, I wish I took a zoomed out picture too, but this is right beside my bed, right by my foot down here is my bed, and that's it, that's my room. And I just have this tiny little wheel and my bed, and that was my first place right out of college, and made it work. And more roosters, more chickens. Then I started doing more of the shows, more of the craft fairs, getting more into different juried shows, and that really boosted my confidence quite a bit. That was our first rendition of the, let's see if I can find him. It is so embarrassing now to look at it, but man, have we come a long way.
I think it's in the other one.
Is it? Oh, I think you're right. Dang, I'll find it eventually, I guess.
Farm
But yeah,
kids
it definitely, it looks a little bit different now than it used
So
to.
cute.
So you used the same technique. So you didn't use those little pens to do those giant areas of green. Did you use a brush?
To paint on the underglaze?
Yeah.
I did the same technique where I'd just paint all of that green and then I'd carve away everything in the background. Yeah. And those were all slips at that time, I think. Those were all slips. I was making a dark slip.
Super cute.
So I feel like it, you can tell a little bit more with that 50-50 rule. Like I'm leaving out quite a bit up here and out here, and especially with that one, I'm leaving out big chunks over here. So I was still trying to figure out the play with the color and the composition, how I'm not painting on color to the actual character. I was lazy and I didn't want to do more work, so I was like, that's good enough. And so
And you like to keep like the carved texture?
Yes.
And there's a reason why you go.
yeah, that's a good question. I didn't talk about that yet too much. I feel like I'm super OCD, so I'm like
everything's
straight line, and I think it just goes with the rest of the piece too. If I do like a aggressive wood cut or something, I think that looks so good. I really like how people can just like chop away the background and it looks so good. If I were to do that, it would look like a total mistake. So I feel like if I, with that meticulous line carving away straight up and down, for some reason that's just what my brain went to. I could do a horizontal line if I felt like it, and do, the opposite way. But for whatever reason, this is just what my brain went to right off the bat. Yeah.
I like all that. Unglazed?
These, I did eventually glaze this one, but these are still this one right here is in the underglaze. That one was with glaze over top of it. You can kind of see a little bit of that shininess to it. And same with this one, it's a little shiny. And that was whenever I was spraying the glaze on top. So I'd water down the glaze and then just do a fine mist around that in a spray booth, big mask, all that good stuff. I still tried to stay away from spraying. It's not great for you, but I liked how I could kind of get that finish to it.
I like on that one how you flip the positive and negative space towards the bottom.
Yeah.
And then did the white with the dark background and then dark with the white background.
Yeah, I was trying to play around with kind of how like this part here is what you're talking about, or
No, that
these
part.
colors.
No, towards the bottom of that one. How the leaves suddenly
yes,
become the white
yes,
space instead of the background.
Thanks. I have totally gotten away from that because I felt like I couldn't. I wanted the negative space to be its own entity, and so I felt like when I brought those into the white now, it kind of got confusing in my mind of like,
It does get confusing.
right? But then it also adds that layer of interest of like, oh, that's interesting.
Because where is the line that you flip it and where do you stop that?
Right, exactly, yeah. So I started to kind of there's a few more in here, I think, when I was doing more ocean type things and trying to figure out the play between those two things. I was like, I wonder how I can get that to make more sense. Kind of like with this too, these big ones in front are more that white background, and that's, it got really confusing. It was like, which one is which? But I did like some of the effects that I could get from that. And then I started doing some cow butts. Then I started adding the secondary colors into it, making it pop a little bit more. And that was really interesting to me. Again, doing more of the, just testing out the negative versus the positive space and seeing what was what. I feel like I got really, really detailed. This probably took me like 2 or 3 hours just to do a stupid little cup. And I just would work way too hard on the piece. And I thought it was interesting at the time because the imagery wasn't super impressive. It was just like leaves and stuff. I feel like I had to make it really intricate and had to make it very detailed to make it interesting. And so now I feel like I have more of that narrative, more the color and other technical things that make it just as interesting without having to go crazy on the details. So I feel like the imagery is kind of a little bit more interesting now than it used to be. And again, that's kind of that play with that positive and negative space on the top and the bottom and the colors and stuff. I had my friend say, "Why whales?" one time. And I was like, "Why not whales? I don't care." This was my main color scheme for a while, that red and pink. I really liked that. Cacti have always been a theme. Space was a theme before, and now I'm just starting to come back to it. I'm very interested in space. Not as much cowbutts anymore. More birds, more things. And then it really started to get more and more detailed, more evolved. The colors were starting to become more evolved, a two-tone type of thing. And then I started to have, more professional photo shoots done. My brother, again, was into lighting and motion graphics and video making, so he could help me with some of these more professional things. I got a nicer quality camera. I started investing in myself. I invested in shows. This was my first show at Charlie Cummings. They asked me to do something way too soon in my career, and I feel like I totally flopped it. So now I'm like mortified anytime I look at any of these. I'm like, oh, it was too soon. But I still had a really good time carving in front of the TV, watching Grey's Anatomy all hours of the night, making this series of work with just this one body. And I think this was also the series that I did for my solo show on top of the Charlie Cummings one, where it just had, cayenne peppers, lemon plants, different things that kind of showed the medicinal things that I would use. One of my first pictures there, some chili bowls and things. This was one of my first rounds at the new light box that I had gotten. So again, just trying to be more detailed with things. That one took forever, and then it split in half. It was so sad. That thing was like this big. I was like, there's no way it's making it through. More things, more space themes. Then I started getting more into planters, doing different shows. Again, all of this. This was one of my first drops on my website. Some more professional pictures that I felt like, I could put on my website and get things a little bit more, just professionally taken. And I could apply to more shows with these, and just started to take off more from here. This is those are my rats. Those are the first rendition of the rats, and that was fun. I had a lot of fun with this piece, but obviously not super functional, more sculptural. I think I labeled it as the sugar jar, so you can get your sugar out of that. There's a little spoon down here. Okay. This was my switch. So I forgot to say this earlier too. I went from full-time job, health insurance, benefits, great, so good, teaching every day, awesome, to COVID, teaching online, quitting my job, and completely changing my work. And all of that happened within like 6 months. And it was just, I don't know how I still made it through that, but I'm really glad that I made that switch and did it, because then I started doing more Procreate stuff, and I started making stickers and other things digitally, doing more marketing online. And I started to change my color palette, making the characters a little bit more interesting. There's the frog that couldn't swim. He's changed a little bit more now. That looks a little bit more like him. But again, little mushroom lady, and some other things. So, and Pips. Oh, and she looks exactly the same. And then, of course, the rats. So, again, just funny to look back and see how that has evolved. Colors changing. That was one of my first pieces in Companion Gallery in Tennessee. I was getting asked to shows at this point, and that was really exciting. And I was selling work online. My Instagram had kind of taken off at this point, so I was again taking more pictures. I moved into my own studio full time, and I had two of my good friends working with me in the studio. And we had a kiln in there, so it just felt like everything was kind of taking off at this point. And again, more shows, craft fairs, and different things. This was the first solo show I paired with my friend that did the butterfly things down here in the front. Her name's Merritt Metzger, and she does sgraffito also. And so that was really cool to have that show paired with her as well. I got to show these jars in a few places. And then again, more bright work. I started to do more sculptural stuff, a little floaty teacup thing with frog. So I'm trying to bring back my love of sculpture into the functional. I did a show for Clay at Carr with their You Know Me Cup show, and so that challenged me to make a new form, do some different things like that. Same with Companion Gallery. They asked me to be in a surface show, so I made a weird little teapot mushroom guy. And it just pushed me to make new forms, and I still do that now, where I'm in new if I get asked to a show or apply to a different show, like last call at Companion Gallery, I did a thermos set, and you also got some stuff in there and got a really cool hat. But yeah, I think those shows are really cool because it pushes you to make new forms, and it's just fun. Like I just really enjoy challenging myself in that way too. One of my first talks, workshop things that I did right at the beginning, one of my first awards that I got, best teapot in strictly functional national pottery something or another. So then it really started to kind of hit home that I could do this full time. Like I was doing it full time, but it just then once I was getting the recognition for it, I was like, oh, this actually is a job. Like I actually can do this. And I got asked to be part of Nsika Amico's demoing booth along with this piece and some other things. Again, more shows, more professional headshots. That's in my studio right now. And Ceramics Monthly, I got to write an article for them a year or two ago, and continuing on, more vultures, more characters, and so on. More stuff. And I started making prints and more digital work was really fun to start incorporating. Then I started doing more of these wall hangings for more shows to kind of reach a broader audience, so kind of shifting some gears there too. And this is some of my latest work. This was in Mug Madness this year at Saltstone. They do like a pair up of a bunch of mugs and they battle each other in these rounds. It's very fun. It's like March Madness but for mugs. And I think that's my last picture. Yep. The thermos set I had in Companion Gallery for this year. And it was a lot of fun making that too. So that's my whole thing.
Welcome for her nap.
It has to be included. Awesome. Cool. Well, I am going to do a little bit more carving up here, and if there are any last minute questions that anybody has, we still have a bit of time.
2 minutes.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah.
So some of your pieces I saw you're putting little feet on them. So you throw and then you go back and do and they just hand squish them.
Yeah. So I'll do. I'll show you. I have the cup here. I'll put it out for you. I don't know if you want to flip that back up, you can. But these little feet on the bottom, this would be like with my handles, if I wanted my handles to be painted and smoothed in completely, I would do the same type of thing. But with my handles, I like them to be a little bit more themselves, like one thing. But I like these smoothed in. So I'll take 3 balls of clay, even balls of clay, slip and score those into the surface so they're like short little nubs all here. And then I take water and I'll start to move these up like I would pull a handle like this, and then I take my rib tool and chop them down all to a certain size, and I flip it over, and that's what it does. And if they're not all the same height and it goes a little bit like this, even better. It's got a little more character to it, but I can also go and chop them down even more if I need to.
Do you use one of those like circular to see like to get perfect measurement?
I should do that, but I don't. Yeah. I should definitely. But also I notice not only that, if I don't do it like perfect triangular, sometimes it can tilt a little bit funny, especially if you put the handle not where a foot is and then it wants to lean. I've done that a few times where I'll set it down and it'll just go like that. So I have to be careful where I put the handle out too. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Any other questions?
Can we talk a little bit about your handles?
Yes, yeah, we can do it. Does anybody have any clay? I don't have any clay. I don't know if anybody works in this space or if we're just visiting.
There's some clay in my cup, but I don't think it's.
It's a little hard. If I can find any clay, I absolutely would do. I can squish it back. I'll just put it back. Nobody.
$1 in there. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see what their name is. I don't know. Natalie? I don't know. I think Natalie. Cool. Who said they pinched handles? Anybody do pinched handles?
I do sometimes.
Cool. I am really surprised. Yeah. Does anybody pull handles? Does anybody extrude handles? I really like the one finger handle look. I think that most people probably hate holding a one finger handle unless you have really tiny fingers like I do. But I'll try and make at least a 2-finger handle for myself. Is this so? Oh, perfect. So I'll start off with just like a solid ball of clay, no bigger than my thumb really. But this is might be a little bit bigger than a one finger handle, and it'll fit onto this piece pretty well. So I'm going to take this, and I always use 6 fingers, or yeah, these 6 fingers here, and I'm going to spin this around, and the goal is to make like a vertebrae shape. That's the shape. I used to say wishbone for some reason. That's not true. It's a bone, just like a dog bone shape. I want it thinner in the middle and thicker on the ends. I feel like when you can obviously get this look with any technique, but I feel like again, it brings back in some of that sculptural side for me, and I really enjoy that. I also want to remember to make sure to toss it every which way, up and down, side to side, and so it all is even. I'll eventually move up a little bit and squish some of that length out.
Are you pushing up with your thumb?
Not really. I'm pressing with these, and then I'm controlling the height with these. And so the pressure is really coming from the pads of these 2 fingers, and I'm using these on the outside of this, not so much here, but I'm trying to not let that get too high on the outside, if that makes sense, and keep it controlled a little bit more. The goal is just to not squeeze too aggressively, because I can always make it wider. I can't, bring it back into that shape as easy. So that's about good for that. So that's kind of where I want to start off with. Then, I don't know if you can see too well, but I have to go down here. See if I can move this down. Yes. Oh, that's so confusing. Cool. I'm so sorry, that probably made your head hurt. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to just use these 4 fingers, and I'm going to pinch straight out to the sides, and I'm going to try and create this diamond shape. And it's going to match the shape of this handle. So you can tell that that's more diamond shaped there. And same with this, that's more diamond shaped. So that's the goal, to kind of replicate this. Same thing down here. I'm pinching in and out to try and get that diamond shape in the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to work all the way up through this. I'm going to pinch in and up, and I'm doing like a 2 out of 10 on pressure. I'm not trying to go super aggressive with this. I'm going to go in and up, in and up, in and up until those 2 connect, and then I've got that vertebrae. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. In and up, in and up, in and up. I'm not squeezing and pinching like this. I'm doing this. In and up. So it moves that through. Now I'm not trying to get it too wide. If I want it wider, then I just do this. But I want it to be nice and slim in the middle, so I'm going in and up. If you want a really wide strapped handle, you can absolutely make it that way. But I like it this way. I don't want this to get too thin. I don't want these sides to get too thin, so I'm going to taper this down. Again, 1 out of 10 on pressure, very, very light. Switch it around, do the same thing. And now my goal is just to elongate. I'm going to go in here at the sides, pinch in and up, in and up. And if I want a bigger handle, I just got to get more clay, because this is probably as big as it's going to get. Maybe 1 more pull. And so I kind of want that soft, like ovalish diamond shape. Like soft diamond, but kind of an oval in the middle. Like that. A little bit longer. And then I can do my last trick. The real reason why I use Amico underglaze bottles is not for the underglaze. It's so I can attach handles to them. And so this, whenever I pinch this and stick this onto any surface, whatever, it could be a water bottle, whatever, I like to just shape this onto something besides my cup. So if I'm attaching this to this body there, this shape matches perfectly to this shape. If I'm doing one of the smaller ones down there that's like the little rounded cup, maybe I want to have one of those cups finished already. That way I can attach it to that one first and mimic that shape perfectly. So now I'm going to bend this over. It's probably going to do a little cracking. And that's okay. I don't want to add water at this stage. It's going to stick to the glaze bottle and it's going to mess up our whole thing when we try and take it off. So no water. Make sure that gets on there nice and flush. And now I've got somewhat of a handle. So I'm still going to keep adjusting that shape, but that is how I start it. I also use a lot of spit. So you can clone me and I can charge more for it. I don't want it too thin again, so I'm just going to compress that a little bit. And just kind of smooth out some of those rough areas to begin with. Now if I compare it to the other one, I'm going to notice that this part up here at the top is popped out a little bit. And so I'll put them side by side so you can see what I'm talking about. Maybe. Last time I did this in a demo, my cup was full of water and I just... So now I look every time just in case. So you can tell that that little angle here at the top, I don't have that yet in this one. So I'm going to start with that shape and then I'm going to move down to the bottom and make that a little bit longer. So that is the next step. To get that, I'm going to take my thumbs and my index fingers. My index fingers will go a little bit lower and my thumbs will go a little higher and I push up. And that is it. I mean, it's just simple. You just barely touch it a little forward. Now that I want this a little bit lower, just squish it down a little bit and just slowly shape that into where you want it to go. Very, very small, tiny touches. And that pretty much gets it to about the shape that I want it. Give or take. So now I'm going to do small little adjustments like how, it's just a little bit sharper. Obviously, I've done more work with this one. So I'm just going to sharpen these edges up. And to do that, I'm going to create more of that edge. I'm going to take my thumb and my index finger here in the middle and compress ever so slightly. And that really creates a much more dramatic, sharp edge. Same to the other side. And then same to the bottom here. I'm going to push this up a little. Same to the other side. And I'm only looking at it from this one angle. So now I need to get over top of it. I'm going to go here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm compressing that in and just evening this out. So I want to look at it from all directions, making sure that everything is in place. I can compress this in a little bit. And then this up. So really a pinched handle is going to look completely different each time as somebody does it. Like this is just one way of doing it. It allows so much room for sculpture and just an interpretation in each different handle. It's never the same really, unless you do 100 of them. But also, I used to compare my handles to each piece that I'm wheel throwing, and I would spend 100 hours wheel throwing compared to 1 hour handle making. So you really just have to practice handles. And being, told to make 100 handles for one project really scarred me, and I think that now I feel like I can see so many interpretations of one method of, like just the pinch handle can be so many different interpretations. So
you put that on after you finished all the carving?
No, I do before the carving.
You do?
Yep. So I paint. I do it right after. So I trim it. I put underglaze on it, and then I attach the handle after that, and then I carve it after that. but I wait for it to set up in my damp box overnight just to give it some time, and then I can usually go back and carve it.
Do you ever apply underglaze to the handles?
I don't. And I think if I did, then I would apply the handle first, and then I would paint the underglaze onto it if I wanted it all the same color. But I think I want to try working with colored porcelain and making colored porcelain handles. That's kind of my next jumping off thing. But I do so much to the surface already. I'm like, the handle can just be plain. But I think it'd be fun to have another pop of color or something in there too. So I think if I were to do it, it would be a porcelain stain with the handle. So I think I'm gonna try that at some point in the future.
How are you keeping it clean though, putting it on the colored surface, because you're introducing a little bit of water or slip or something?
Totally. So if I were to apply, I'm gonna take this one off. So to take this off, I'm just gonna put my thumbs here and lift up. And then same here. Since I don't have water in there, it's not that hard to get off. So if I'm applying this to a piece, say it's this one, I would put this here, like that. And I would take any needle tool or whatever, outline this, take this off. I would scrape off the underglaze from where I want to attach things. If you do, sometimes if the underglaze and the clay are attached together, it pops off. So I just don't mess with it, and I just scrape off the underglaze. Slip and score that. The key is whenever I'm slipping and scoring, my piece I want to be more on the dry side. I want to be able to like squish this and it's not going to move. I want my handle to be flexible still, so I want to just make this. I want this to be more on the dry, like hard leather hard side. Slip and score the snot out of this piece. I don't use external slip at all. I feel like I don't use magic water, I don't use wax, I use damp boxes. So I slip and score aggressively on this side, and then I let it set over here until it gets tacky. And then I score my handle, and I don't add water to the handle. And then once this gets tacky, I'll squish the two together, and so it'll, if anything does come out of the sides, it's like a paste. And that way it's not going to be oozing water out of the sides. And then I take a really small paintbrush and just go around and clean up the sides of it, and just smooth those in together. And usually I don't have too many problems. If I do have something that gets on the surface, I can just go back and paint over with the color that I had. But also I'm going to carve that surface anyways. So again, wait till the very end. Go back and touch up everything. Once I'm done completely carving, I can go back and touch things up if I need to. So that's how I do handles. Any questions on handles? Sweet. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how you like travel with work. Like, do you just drive around with your
I do. So that's a great question. So I got into a little bit of a, thank you, whoever's played this week. They're going to be like, what kind of
You should have left it for that.
But I ran into a little bit of a problem this past couple months. I was coming down a mountain pass, like 35 miles per hour, and I hit a patch of black ice, and I started to go sideways. And it was either flip the trailer or ram it into a median, so it didn't flip. I chose the latter, and it's got a big hole in the side. I had to do a bunch of repairs, had to get a brand new axle, and nothing in my trailer broke. None of my pots, nothing in my damp box. I don't know how, but I think that with packing things, I wrap things in plastic and bubble wrap. They're packed together so tightly that they don't move. And so it's the same thing when you're shipping things. You just tape them together and they're not going to move. So that's how I do finished work. But with pieces still in progress, I have my damp box that has the plaster in the bottom. And the plaster acts like a gripper, so it doesn't really move. I do notice if they bump into each other sliding around, if I run down a mountain pass on accident, and they bump into each other, which they did, some of the bottom sides will get like a little jarred or whatever, and I'll just go back in, smooth them with a sponge, and repaint them. But now I like to put some plastic in between so they can have some cushion to like bounce into each other. but they don't really move. They're in the damp box, I stack them really good. I Tetris the back of my car really tight. If anything's really loose or just like individually put places, then it probably would break, but I pack box after box right next to each other, so they're all kind of like bungeed together, and they don't really move anything. So, but the damp boxes are a game changer. If I didn't have that, I probably would lose half of my work. So yeah, damp boxes are pretty good. Good stuff. I have 2 right now. That's all I can carry. That's my max load. So,
And do you just, do you just find studios along the way to work out of? Or?
Yeah, so I've set it up where I've got this like 1.5 year long tour, and so I can have, I know this stuff is coming up, so if I make, 10 or 12 pieces at the last place I was at, I can ask the next studio, say, hey, if you have a bisque going on this day, I'd love to squeeze some pieces in or whatever. I also have a stop in. I was a resident at Wildfire Ceramics in Missoula, Montana, and so that my partner's out in Helena, so anytime I go back through that way, I'm like, hey, do you guys have any stuff or firings going on, let me know. And then also just asking, reaching out to people. Like if I'm driving by a studio or whatever, I just reach out on Instagram. I'm like, hey, if you guys want to connect, meet up, whatever. And I just think it's really cool to be able to just connect in that way across the country. Like you've got this one connecting factor of clay, and people are like, oh yeah, for sure. It's like the most connected community that I found within the art field. Like I know a lot of painters that are like, oh, don't share my secrets, And I feel like the clay community we have to, because we all need to share kilns. We all need to do wood fires together. It's like the best community that I found by far. So I have 0 problems finding anything because everybody around the country has been so awesome and just open to whatever. And then there's also kilnshare.com, which is registered kilns where you can go into people's home studios and fire work there. So that's pretty cool too. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you guys. I don't know. She just likes to be the attention, so if she's not the attention,